Okay, we're recording. So we're recording right now. So
Okay.
we can erase all this, so don't worry about it.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm here today with Geoff Sinn. Geoff is a customer of mine, and we have been talking about a variety of possibilities that Geoff has going forward in his career. He's been extremely successful, extremely impactful, and we've sort of developed a relationship that we're starting to talk about what's going on around the world that could leverage his skill set. So Geoff is in the managed services world. And I said to Geoff, I've done a little homework on managed services, and I'm big into this disruption stuff. So all I can think of in the disruption world is that everything started when we had this digital transformation with the internet. But let's not go back that far. How about your definition of what disruption means to you?
Hey, thanks, Tony. It's kind of interesting. If I can use a couple of examples, I'd like to do it. And
sure.
When I did my first startup, that was back in the .com period, and that was the late '90s, the early 2000s, and there were a lot of things that were going on at that time that actually have formed the basis of what you're seeing in the industry, in the market right now. And so what was happening back then is you got all these small companies were popping up. Money was flowing pretty freely. There were lots of these ideas out there. Companies were IPOing with a business plan. That was about it. But it was kind of a crazy time. But one of the things that happened back then was that a lot of companies started realizing IT is not a core competency for me. My core competency is what do I want to bring to the market, try to disrupt the market. So what happened at that time is this kind of radical thought happened, what they called internet data centers. And that meant that companies like Exodus or AT&T got into it, NTT, they all got into it, and they created just data centers. And they said to some of these smaller companies, hey, we'll give you the ping, the power, and the pipe. You bring your infrastructure in here. You don't have to worry about having a data center to run it. We'll do that for you. And then they evolved to saying, well, hold on, why don't we provide you the whole infrastructure? So we'll buy the servers, you can use them. We'll buy the storage, you can use them. And then we'll team up with other companies who will come in under this, and they'll start providing services like backup as a service, storage as a service, whatever it might be. So you, as a .com company, can focus all your energies and your efforts on what it is you want to do to disrupt the market. Now, the thing about that, though, that made it very different from what you see now, it was crazy capital intensive. So if you're going to go and build a data center, run a data center, that costs hundreds of millions of dollars for these people to set this infrastructure up. The business that we provided was backup as a service. Well, we had to go buy all the tape libraries, all the lights, all of that. So we had to have a lot of money to be able to do it. It was but what happened was that all of a sudden, people said, geez, the traditional way you outsource, I don't have to do that anymore. And these internet data centers ultimately evolved to the cloud. That's eventually what they came. So that's the genesis of the cloud. And so the disruption that started there, which said I'm starting to disrupt a lot of people that sell hardware, they don't sell it to the end user, they sell it to me. Fast forward to today, and what has happened now is that the disruption is happening way faster. It's way more targeted. It can go to a specific function to do it and be successful. Let me give you an example. There's a company that I know about up in Ottawa. I'm a Canadian, so I keep in touch with what's going on there. So there's a company up in Ottawa, and basically they're going to be a little bit of a big disruptor in the market of auditing. And how so? Well, through machine learning, predictive analytics, AI, what they've done is they've created this solution that can crawl through gobs of data. It doesn't matter how much data you have, it can go through it, and from an auditing perspective, it can find anomalies anywhere. The traditional way of doing that was somebody would come in, they would do some sampling to see where there might be anomalies and see if they could find it. That's gone. So you've now got disruption happening much more quickly, much more granular, and it's going to have a much, much bigger impact. And that's kind of the difference. So you've moved from kind of a capital intensive, took time to get this thing set up, a little bit slow, to this happening at lightning speed now, and using things like AI and predictive analytics and machine learning. So you build something and it just gets smarter on its own as it goes along.
Right. And I think, as I hear that, I've worked with, there's a company called Lemonade, and Lemonade just went public, and they virtually overnight have disrupted the insurance industry without the insurance industry knowing what hit them.
Right.
And as you can imagine, the stock went ballistically high, right?
Right.
And
Right.
they basically have done exactly what you just said, but they went in and decided, we're going to take on the insurance industry and all the crap that goes on in that world. So
Right.
let me follow up with this. So part of our coaching deal is that we're able to get inside the head of Geoff Sinn and find out what are those core capabilities that he has significant strength in so that we can leverage it. One of the ones that comes up for you, because you had a few really good ones, is this whole idea of communicating. And it's not the basic everyday being able to complete a sentence sort of communicating. It's influencing through communication. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that strength of yours.
Yeah, thanks, Tony, and I appreciate that. And so, one of the interesting things that I quickly found out when I was, doing the startup in the early 2000s was that, hey, when times are good, and they were good for the beginning of ours, we were having money thrown at us, we were growing like crazy. We actually started writing an S1. We thought we were going to go up the whole deal. It was kind of easy to communicate because you were just communicating happy stuff, and everything was going great. When the .com went to the .com bomb, everything ended in a hurry. I mean, that just fell off a cliff. And all of a sudden, companies were going under everywhere. That money became incredibly tight. We had to scale back. We had to become much more focused. We had to become much more cost conscious. And make changes that you don't really want to or have to make. One of the things that I did, because I felt I owed it to the employees, was I had weekly meetings, and I said, well, here, I told them what was going on. But did I really tell them what was going on? No, I didn't. I felt as a CEO, that was a burden I had to carry, and I had to protect them from the real bad news and shield them, and figuring I'm doing the right thing. I couldn't have been more wrong, Tony. And what happened was some of the employees came into my office one day and said, look, Geoff, we appreciate what you're doing, but we really don't believe you're giving us the straight goods. I said, okay, yeah, like you really want to know? And they said, we do. I said, happy to do it. So the next meeting we had, I remember I laid it out there, hey, we're getting bridged. I can't tell you from pay period to pay period if I'm gonna make payroll. I don't know. I just don't know. I can't tell you if we're going to be in business a month from now. I believe we will. I believe so strongly in the model. I believe so strongly in you as the team. I believe we will, but I can't tell you. And it was like I was looking at a herd of deer looking back and with the floodlights on them. Like it was wow. But and I thought, oh my goodness, I've made a terrible mistake. But something, almost to a person, every employee came into my office sometime over the next couple of weeks and said, we're in because, and so I realized in times of disruption, in times of when you're going through, turbulent times, full transparency, not less transparency, is the answer. I mean, trust your people. They're adults. Give them all the information they need to make the informed decision. Because we also said to some of our people, look, we know some of you can't take this. We understand you're in a situation where you can't kind of ride this wave one way or the other. If you want to leave and you need to go somewhere else, don't sneak around and do it. Flat out tell us, we'll help you get a job somewhere else. We'll give any of you a reference. And we honestly meant it, because we're saying, every one of you people sitting here, we believe is a superstar. We believe we hired up, and we're going to help you out. So that kind of transparency, that kind of communication, like just had the people think, geez, Geoff's got my back. The company's got my back. Geoff's trustworthy.
What's beautiful about that? What's beautiful about that whole thing is that today, when I hold, like I'm doing these massive 6-month coaching projects with people of color and women, and we're talking about some of the nuances of leadership, right? And it's very clear to me that we have been trained from an early age to hide stuff, to avoid stuff, right? But now, one of the critical skills of the disruptive leader is that very transparency, right? So if you come into this knowing that example, wow, you're like light years ahead of the game, because a lot of leaders have been used to having their communication person that would write something up that looks great and everything, but most people read through it, saw through it. Right. You had to experience that emotional connection with your employees, and that immediately your trust level went sky high.
Right.
That's very
Sorry,
commendable.
Tony, if I can, and I mean, just to make a real quick statement, you can't fake empathy, and people see right through you. If you're up there and you're saying stuff, and you're saying the right words, but it's obvious that you don't believe them, they see through that in a heartbeat. So people want to follow somebody they trust. People want to follow somebody they believe in. People want to look. Nobody would have held it against me if ultimately we had failed as a company, but we didn't. And I think a big part of the reason is that of the quality of the person that we had, and the fact that they knew everything that was going on, so they could get invested in it, and nothing was a surprise. Now, I believe that was one of the reasons that ultimately, Arsenal had a successful exit. So I truly believe that was one of the reasons.
So let me ask a question off the cuff that I usually save for one of my last coaching sessions, and you and I aren't quite there yet, but so now you've taken a big job somewhere. From your experience, tell me about your first 90 days. What would you have done different? What are you going to do differently in this 90 days that you had not done in other ones?
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be maybe a little bit of a shock to you or whatever. So, and I've kind of, I've learned this the hard way. So if you come rumbling in there, right away, and you're going, okay, I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this. I'm going to do this, and you're all, full of vinegar and go.
Yeah.
You know what happens, or I've seen, you lose credibility. I mean, people are bringing you in there because they believe, yes, you can affect change. Yes, you can affect positive change. Yes, you're going to grow, and yes, things are going to happen. I'll put it in quickly, but quickly doesn't mean they got to happen in the first 90 days. So what I've done, or what I tell people when I'm talking to them, what I'm going to do, depending on the size of the organization, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and really understand what your business is. Okay, because how can I go and say I'm going to make changes when I truly don't understand the bowels of your business? I don't understand the day-to-day nuances of your business. What's important to you, what's working for you, what's not working for you. I mean, yeah, sure, I can say I understand managed service, or I understand this, but do I really understand what you're doing? So I'm going to spend the time talking to every employee that's going to be part of my organization that's going to report to me. And I know that sounds, people go, wow, that might take time. I said, yeah, but it's the best time I've ever spent. And I tried it out on one company that I went into, and I had about 30 people in the company that I was trying to help them, change their model. I sat down and talked to every person. You wouldn't believe the response I got from that. It's like, wow, this guy actually cares about me. This guy, I mean, we got down to like, what motivates you? What's the goal in your life? What do you want to get out of all of this? And so then what I would say is, okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back, and I'm going to start putting the plan together that we're going to move forward with. But if I come in and say day one, I'm executing on a plan, I believe anyway that I've kind of lost credibility, and I'm going to lose people because they're going, you didn't even talk to me. You didn't even understand what we're about. And now you're telling me what you're going to change.
One of the interesting parts of your answer there, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I think there's ways to do that that save you time and reduce your learning curve, and help you read within the first 90 days who on your team has the skill sets you need and you want, and the behaviors necessary, and all that sort of stuff. I think there's real easy ways to do that. Here's one of the tough ones, though, and we work on this in our coaching program, is that how do I talk to the board? Like when I'm interviewing and the board is saying, hey, Geoff, these are the numbers we need to have, or this is what we think is going on. This is a critical role for senior executives, because the board only knows what the past CEO has told them, right? And or they only know what the CFO has told them. They may not have the whole story, nor are they really interested in the whole story. They're there to provide some guidance at 60,000 feet. But sometimes the questions that you ask the board get them more interested in what you're doing and how you're doing it, because you're building a new operating model. And so, I think one of the questions we talk about in our work is, when a board member says, this is the way we've done things around here for 20 years.
Right.
So when you hear that sort of thing, what kind of response do you think about? And then what do you say? Because one of your great skills, Geoff, is that you know how to pause.
Yeah.
That's so important. Instead of jumping right in the ring, you know how to look a person in the eye, pause, and then frame your questions. So
Yes.
that is another superlative skill that you have. So
Oh,
what do you do when that happens?
Yeah, so let me answer that two ways, two scenarios. Okay,
Okay.
because there can be this scenario. So think about this. So let's say, one of the things that I've done, and I've kind of made my mistakes, so I feel very comfortable in the answer I'm going to give you here. So if I go into a company and I say, let's say I'm not going to go in as at this point the CEO. I'm coming in there to help them build a managed service business, or to start looking at how do I transform that business from where you are now to where you want to be, and managed service is going to be a key component of it. So if it was a public company, the thing I have to realize is that these people are driven, these people are driven by the market, these people are driven by making numbers and all that. So when I first, would do this, that when I would go and talk about it, well, we would create a little, kind of a line of business, and I would start kind of going, it's almost like a skunk works.
Yeah.
But then when they said, okay, now it's time, we think we want to start maybe pushing this out in a bigger way into the company as a whole, they would amalgamate it into the company. And guess what? It just died. And because, when you think about it, if you're going to go and you're going to do something disruptive or innovative, and you're doing it in kind of a larger company, well, think about the quadrants. You have to think 4 quadrants. You're going to have the core business here, all the operations and everything that support that core business. You may have a little bit of a skunk works, and now you've got this block here where you're saying, I'm taking something that I want to get out to market. I want to go. And you start diverting money to that. You start diverting effort to that. Well, what happens with everybody else? They start squawking and saying, well, hold on a second. You just gave him 50 million bucks. If you give me 50 million bucks as your sales guy selling your traditional product, I'll go out and buy a whole bunch more reps. I can guarantee I'll bring you $100 million in. But the CEO is going, well, hold on. Yeah, but I know that's not where the market's going. I know that's what I want to, So consequently, when that model is like a no-win model, I'm telling you right now, I lived through it and I understand it. The way that I'd be talking to the board, if you want to do something like that, what I'm going to ask you to do is take maybe 5%, some equivalent of 5% of your, what maybe your revenues are. You're going to put that at risk to a certain extent. You're going to almost create a little venture thing, and you're going to take this function that you want to do. You're going to move it kind of to the right. You may even put it in a different building or whatever. And you're going to bring some really highly skilled, highly motivated, highly creative people in. And we're going to create this business model where it's not really negatively impacting your core business. So that would be the answer I would give to them there. I'd say, if I come in here and say, put this in here and it's kind of a top down, we're going to make this big disruptive change. It's ultimately going to be a non-starter. So it's
Right.
a little more of the bottom up. You kind of create this a little bit off to the right, but what you're doing is you're saying, I know I need to be in that business. I'm going to have it happen in a positive way. Well, the core engine keeps going and keep everybody else happy. Now, the second alternative where you're saying, well, no, you're coming in and, would I be going in to be CEO of a large company? No, that's not where my skills truly lie. I mean, I can go and create a business in a large company. But if I was going to come in and say, let's say the board, it's a private equity company that's bought a company, because I've had some of them talk to me and say, hey, I bought a managed service company. I need somebody to come in and help do that. So the idea then, when I'm talking to the board members there, okay, you'd be saying to them, you're obviously bringing me in here because you're not happy with kind of the way things are going right now, and you're not happy with the direction. So I would be addressing with the board members, before I go and tell you all these great things I'm going to do for you, you tell me the concerns you have and let me express to you how I'm going to address those concerns. But it's a very different model, because there it is going to be top down, because the whole business is related around managed service, and it's going to be related around the disruption that managed service is going to have. Yeah. If that makes sense, that's kind of the way
those are two great answers. And what you and I have talked about before is that, you got multiple storms coming at you. So you have this black swan with COVID and the financial repercussions of that, and the unemployment. Then you have this whole short-termism, long-termism debate that every leader has, right? And now you have more frequent disruptions happening that may or may not be technology related, right? Because now we're finding that out. There's lots of other disruptions besides technology, and that's happening more and more. So now you're becoming if you can become the consummate leader of short-term, long-term, and figure out how that equation works,
right,
you're the master of your domain.
Right.
Different than the Seinfeld episode, but it is so true. One of the things that I wanted to catch with you before we end this is how do you see, I mean, you're looking 5 years out. Let's just say 5 years out. What does managed services look like to you 5 years out?
Yeah. That, that's a great, that's a great question. And somebody was saying the other day that we've done 5 years of digital transformation in the last 6 months. I mean,
Yeah.
if COVID, it's a terrible thing. Don't get me wrong, but there are within things like this that happen. As crazy it sounds, there are sometimes amazing opportunities, and they by just necessity, it forces things to happen more quickly and happen more. So again, if you look at everything that's going on right now around managed service, everything's getting pushed to the edge. That's what's happening. So when everybody talks IoT and all that, the Internet of Things, and then how do you marry IT with OT, and OT is operational technology. They're two different worlds. And so figuring out how do I marry everything that's going on in a manufacturing plant and all the operational and things with IT in a way, that it makes sense. And so you're going to see everything is going to the edge, and everything's going to happen at the edge. And if you look at the cloud companies, they're all trying to get into that, because a lot of people are saying, like, there's something that I'm involved with now that it's in Africa, and it's kind of like they're setting up all these infrastructure hubs, digital infrastructure hubs all over the place. And the idea being that they're getting little computing pods closer to where the need is. So you think about it, drones are getting all this information, flying over a pond and seeing, oops, there's malaria there, I need to do something about it. Well, right now, if they want to have that information analyzed, it's got to get back to a cloud somewhere. Something happens, way too slow. If you've got a pod at the edge that has the capabilities, they just send it to that pod, and almost instantaneously, the analysis comes back and action gets taken. So that's where it's all going. That's where it's all going. And think about, I'll put something else out. You've got people for IoT are putting all these little pods everywhere. They just are in every city, in every smart city. Well, think about this. Think if let's say you set up inside a smart building, you've got a little computing pod that you're using for that building, so it knows when to open the blinds, it knows when to shut the blinds, it knows what all these different things to do to make that building, let's say, incredibly energy efficient or whatever it is. But you've got something that you could actually offer to anybody. So in other words, if you've got somebody who's working on an application and they're happen to be 2 blocks away,
yeah,
and they say, oh my goodness, I need to do something really quickly, why couldn't you set up a network that incorporates all of these different companies' pods, and he just goes to the closest one, does his thing for 2 minutes, gets charged and back. That's where it's all going. I mean, it's incredibly exciting that it's all like you're going to have a million mini clouds sitting all over the place, and you want to do something, you need to do something quickly. You just go, you're part of this network, and it sends you to the closest little mini pod that has capabilities for you to do what you want to do right then.
I think the scariest thing about this discussion for me, because I have a lot of close friends and that are relatively high in the cybersecurity world, and I jokingly said to one of them the other day, who, by the way, lives in Africa, and that the world's catching up to the military secrets. Like the military has had a lot of this stuff already in some way.
Right.
And that just causes the military to have to go out the next level, whatever that is.
Exactly.
Wow.
Which isn't a bad thing. And so you brought up a good point. So when you talk about the edge, okay, and stuff starts getting pushed to the edge, well, think about that. So when everything was kind of sitting in corporate data centers, your security perimeter was that data center. So you just had to secure that perimeter, and the attack surface, for people trying to get in, was there, and so you could prevent. Now, as you start pushing everything out, to the edge, because people are going, well, I'm in an office in San Francisco, and then data centers in New York. I don't want to have to go back to New York and then to the cloud and then back to New York and back to me. I want to go right to the cloud. So basically, they enable that to happen. But what have you done? You've taken the security perimeter, and now it's way out here, and the attack surface has grown exponentially. So the opportunities for the security business and vertical are through the roof, because now you're going, I got to protect everywhere, and every device. And so, and as IoT gets that all gets going, it just opens up other problems. But when it opens up other problems, it opens up other opportunities.
Yeah, I tell you, this is I've been looking forward to this interview with you, and I enjoy working with you. Now I'm going to give you a chance to do what I do in my other interviews. Is that you got a question for me? Anything? And if I can't answer it, I'll be the first one to edit it out. So don't worry.
So I'd like to kind of push it back to you. I mean, you're talking to, obviously you coach a lot of people, you talk to a lot of companies and all that. So I've given you kind of my view on disruption and what disruption is. How do you see disruption? Like what coming at it from your perspective, kind of collating and compiling all the information you're getting from all these different people that you're having the opportunity to work with, and vice versa. Like, where are you sitting when it comes on the disruption? Like, and where are you seeing opportunities? So I know I'm kind of hitting you with about 3 questions.
No,
but
those are great. Those are great questions. And so let me pause for 1 second and take my own advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's what I know it's not. Let me start with that. I think the majority of the people that we coach, the majority of, and I'm being careful with this word majority, but it really is, the majority of the executive teams would think that disruption causes growth. Because even some of the stuff like you described, they might misunderstand that. They may hear you at ground level saying, "Oh, well, this caused this, and then wonderful things happened." No, here's the real fact. Growth causes disruption.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point.
It's how we leverage that disruption in all these different possibilities, all those innovative ways, that determines if we're going to be winners or losers. So my goal is to develop disruptive leaders who are intellectually extremely curious, because we have this itis going on in American companies, and it's intellectual laziness. Like, we only learn our own little bit, and it's in our workforce, it's in our leaders, and a lot of times it doesn't get vetted out during the interview process. So, and a good example of this is that we sort of expect the impossible. So when we go through a black swan event like COVID, if we didn't have a plan in place for something like this to happen, whatever, not necessarily COVID, but something, if we hadn't done some scenario planning, and all of a sudden we're worried about, are we capitalized enough? Or do we have the right people? And all of a sudden we revert back to safety, right? We run backwards, and we hide, and we stop spending, and we lay off people. And then at the very next sentence that comes out of our mouth is, well, we want to build trust with you, and we want to build loyalty with you. And we want to, I personally have laid off close to 25, almost 30,000 people in my whole career. What? Less than 0.5% probably needed to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
By no fault of their own.
Right.
Well, I tend to think that there are a lot of silent killers that lay underneath the cultures of American companies that the leadership teams know about and don't do anything about them. One is racial equity, and we can go on, but leadership issues. So disruption to me is, what do I need to do to prepare for what kind of growth do I need to do? And this is the big difference. When I'm talking about short-term versus long-term and having to manage both, I mean that 100%, but I need people in my company that understand who is the future customer and what does the future customer's journey look like. And that's where I want to spend my time. So like your example of, give me $50 million if I'm the BD guy, and I'll go out and sell $50 million. Yeah, you're selling $50 million for today.
Right.
And the runway for today's product line is maybe this big. Right. But if we spent that $50 million on here, the runway is exponential.
Right.
And because disruptions are happening faster and faster, we need to be ready for the customer of the future, then the customer of that future, then the customer of that future. Well,
Right.
that's a whole different skill set, mindset, operating model. So that's my answer to that. It really is the myth that disruption causes growth. It's just not it. That's, that's like, that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah, no, that,
The other
it's kind of
thing
funny
is this.
when you were talking, when you were talking, it made me just think of Airbnb. And who was Airbnb shot at? Like people like you and me when they started? No,
Yeah.
they're shot at the millennials, because and I mean my kids go, oh, I'm happy to stay in a hotel if a company wants to pay for it, but when I go on my own trips, I'm at Airbnb, kind of thing. And why would I do anything different? I mean, it's quick, easy, convenient. I don't pay as much, that kind of thing. And so because when you think about it, like the hotel chains, I don't know, I didn't see them doing anything to attract millennials to want to come to stay at their hotel. I mean, because they had a great business going. I mean, they were doing great, but with it's going to be very difficult when you think about it. So when you talk about disruption, Airbnb, they don't own one asset, yet they're the biggest hotel chain if you want to be that, in the world. And so and that's the thing. But where did they look? They didn't look at trying to convince people like us to go do it. Now, people like us start doing it now because their kids are going, Mom, Dad, come on, get with the plan here. What are you staying in a hotel when you can stay in this nice little Airbnb right across the road from me? That kind of thing. So that's exactly what you're saying, that look at the customer of tomorrow and look at where the growth is going to come from. And so, and if you don't start making the change now, when the change comes, you're just going to get caught flat-footed, and it's going to come.
The other thing is that from an agility standpoint, what people don't understand about disruption is that it's already in our DNA how to be agile during disruption. It's built into us. We need to figure that out. We need to learn about it. And that's why there's great authors like Hannah Inman and Charlene Lee. They put disruption into the business category and then the personal category, because they are totally interconnected. And these are all part of when I go and I tell people, like I probably told you when we first started, we don't even have, when a black swan comes, we all go back to zero. I know you heard me say that. So we all go back to zero. We have to prove that we're relevant. So how do we prove we're relevant? Well, first of all, we got to figure out what that means. What are the questions we don't know the answers to? Where are those skill gaps that we have? And worse yet, and this is the toughest question. This is always the last thing I ask every one of my people to do that I coach. What have you unlearned? Right? Take a look at your career. Take a look at where we're going as a country, as a business, as a space, whatever. What have you unlearned? If we're not ready for that answer in an interview, we fail.
Yeah.
We fail. Like you could be, I always joke about Jack Welch, right? Because I worked under Welch's domain, and he could rest in peace. He was a brilliant guy. But if we asked him, what have you unlearned? I think the world would think that he didn't unlearn anything. I think the fact is he was successful because he unlearned a bunch of things.
Right.
And that's the challenge going forward. And I think that's probably the hardest interview question anybody could ask, because that takes mental horsepower to unlearn stuff, especially if it made you successful in the past.
Yeah, it was funny. I read this book, and it was kind of like, it was the name of some guy said, hey, what made you successful in the past may not make you successful in the future. Yeah. And it was written by a guy who was kind of like yourself, an executive coach, and had been in all that, and he kind of worked with CEOs or something, but a lot of them, you're right, were saying, well, doing this has worked for me to get here. And he's going, yeah, but it's not working anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you need to drop that. I mean, yes, your winning formula is not a winning formula anymore. Yeah. Because you're now moved into a role where, you micromanage people or whatever it is. No, that doesn't work. Or, it's my way or the highway or whatever it is, just, doesn't work. And
I've actually, and I'll close with this. I've actually taken over some companies that had well over 1,000 plus people, and they did payroll manually. So they
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
even learn QuickBooks. You know, the easiest thing in the world. They were doing everything manually.
Right.
So, hey, listen, world, this is Geoff Sinn. He's probably one of the best managed services executives there are in the world. Great thinker, superb communication skills. He's ahead of the curve. So I appreciate you being a client and a friend.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. This was thanks so much for having me do this with you. It was great. I've really enjoyed it myself, and it's been invaluable. So listen,
Okay.
it's been a great run. Thank you,
I'll
sir.
give you a chat later this week.
Okay.
Okay.
See you
Bye-bye.
later. Bye.